Welcome to another Scotland Then episode. In this episode, I'll be highlighting newspaper stories from the Scotsman on the 24th, the 25th, the 28th, 29th and 31st of August and the 3rd of September 1981, around the time of Aileen Printie's murder. I know this is the second Scotland Then episode in a row, but a normal Scottish Murders episode will be released next week. It will be the disappearance of Pat McAdam in 1967. Okay, let's go back to August 1981, when I was only 3 years old. So, as the newspaper stories are from August in Scotland, there was a lot of articles about the Edinburgh Fringe, but the one I picked to share with you was written by Anthony Troon, because it really transported me back there, and it made me smile. Normally I would rewrite each article I come across into my own words, but in this case it was just such a well-written, slightly strange article that felt that it could have been part of the Fringe itself that I didn't think I could do it justice by rewriting it. So on this occasion I'm going to read out the article headed "Fringe Takes to the Streets" by Anthony Troon in the Scotsman on the 24th of August verbatim, and it is as follows. Here is a short review of the High Street, Edinburgh, from the Hunter Square Junction at the east to St Giles Street at the west, including Parliament Squares, east and west, and the Waxworks and Wireworks courtyards. It's not often you're asked to review a street, so you have to get it right. The theory was that 59 half-hour events would take place there yesterday between 1 p.m. and 6 p.m, and quite possibly this is precisely what happened. Nobody could be sure. But what did materialise was a great street charivari, in which the immovable listened to the inaudible, the ineffable watched the indefinable, while eating the indigestible. And even the pushing and shoving was done in a spirit of cultural thirst. It was a chance to see how wide is the Fringe's spectrum this year. The limited company were doing a piece of allegorical grotesquerie involving murder and hanging, only yards from where the fourth children's group's mouths were working in silent song, totally unable to overcome the sound of someone from another show playing the Australian national anthem on the saxophone. There were even people who weren't expected. 7 monks of mixed sex, including the only holy brethren to wear blue drop earrings, were cavorting about in heavy habits, giving a taste of what seemed like a lively and original show. Yet this fairly solid theatre company don't even have a theatre, and merely put on their show whenever they find a gap in the street. And yes, there were people in the high street yesterday watching empty gaps by mistake, while the show they were anticipating happened somewhere else. There was a children's theatre with exotic costumes, and elsewhere reggae songs about body odour. Nothing, however, nice or nasty, was overlooked in the high street yesterday afternoon. There was even a blue rinse lady in the window seat of a cafe, stirring brown rinse tea and watching the goings-on with blank incomprehension. At that point, she became part of the Fringe too. I really enjoyed this article, and I hope you did too. Okay, now on to something a bit more serious in our next story, which was headed "Forensic Scientist Discredited." The Home Secretary at the time, William Whitelaw, announced there was to be a review of criminal cases involving discredited forensic scientist Dr. Alan Clift, following revelations that Clift's flawed evidence led to the wrongful conviction of John Preece for murder. John Preece, a lorry driver, was sentenced to life in 1973 for the killing of Mrs. Helen Will in Aberdeen, based largely on forensic testimony by Dr. Alan Clift that was later proven unreliable. John Preece was released in 1981 after serving 8 years, when the appeal court ruled that the jury would not have convicted him had they known key details omitted from Alan Clift's report. Dr. Alan Clift, who had been suspended on full pay since 1977 and was finally given 6 months' notice of compulsory retirement in September 1981, had failed to disclose crucial blood grouping results in his rewritten report for the Scottish trial. The original English version had stated that Helen Will's blood group matched John Preece's, a fact later deemed significant. The appeal court emphasised that forensic scientists must present all relevant facts, leaving interpretation to the court. The Home Secretary, William Whitelaw, had initially resisted reopening cases, arguing that any injustices would have surfaced by now. However, further inquiries had revealed that files from 1967 to 1977, which had involved Dr. Alan Clift and not guilty pleas, could still be examined. This move followed mounting pressure from MPs and legal experts, some of whom defended Clift's integrity, while others criticised his technical competence and selective reporting. The case also sparked debate within the forensic community. Dr. David Patterson, former president of the Forensic Science Society, urged Dr. Clift to appeal his dismissal, while Professor William Tilstone of Strathclyde University downplayed the controversy, suggesting differences in interpretation had been exaggerated. Dr. Alan Clift was reported to be under intense strain and declined comment about the impending reviews of criminal cases he had been involved with. That's the thing, forensics are fantastic, as are forensic officers, and forensics, in the main, can't be argued with. However, that only applies if all forensic information is reported, and not only selected parts. This next story was sad, and I feel a different way of saying what was said could have changed how it likely impacted a bereaved and angry mother. According to the Scotsman, on the 3rd of September 1981, Margaret Allen from Drumchapel in Glasgow was calling for an inquiry into the sudden death of her 10-year-old daughter Deborah, who died after undergoing routine growth-related tests at the Royal Hospital for Sick Children. Deborah had been admitted for investigation into her short stature but lapsed into a coma and was transferred to the Southern General Hospital, where she underwent emergency brain surgery. Sadly, though, she died early the following day. A community medicine specialist, Dr. Duncan Fletcher, advised that insulin had been used as part of the testing process on Deborah, and he acknowledged that he had received reports from staff that there had been problems regarding the dosage of insulin that was being given to Deborah. While Dr. Fletcher did stress that insulin is a standard tool in growth assessments worldwide, he admitted that Deborah's case of death remained unknown and that a full investigation would be conducted, going on to state that he would not be saying anything further at this time, as a report had already been submitted to the Procurator Fiscal. This tragedy sparked wider debate, but what would have really upset me if I had been Deborah's mother is what Dr. Derek Buchanan of the British Medical Association said in the same newspaper article. He said that while he expressed great sympathy for Margaret Allen, he wholeheartedly defended the continuation of such tests, arguing that medical process depends on calculated risk, and that, for every tragedy like this, there must be hundreds of successes. So far I can understand his viewpoint. Nothing wrong in what he said there, but he didn't stop there. He went on to say, tragic as it is, it does not mean all tests throughout the world should stop. You might as well say one should not cross the road in case one gets run over, or that one should not fly in an aeroplane in case it crashes. We all take risks. Now those few sentences right there really got my back up, and I can only imagine how Deborah's mum Margaret, who had just lost her 10-year-old daughter, felt about Dr. Derek Buchanan's words and his great sympathy. It was reported by a relative that Margaret Allen was distraught and under sedation at her home, but that she was determined to uncover the truth about her daughter's death. I did try and find out the results of the inquiry into Deborah's death, but I wasn't able to find anything. So this next story in The Scotsman, on the 3rd of September 1981, intrigued me enough to look into further, which took me to May 1982. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start in September 1981, where 20-year-old Stephen Thom of High Street in Kirkcaldy was standing trial at the High Court in Perth, accused of murdering 40-year-old William Slight on the foreshore near Kirkcaldy Esplanade. Stephen Thom claimed that he acted in self-defence. He explained that he had previously been beaten up by another Kirkcaldy man, and so he had started to carry a sheath knife, which he strapped to his leg. And so, when he was accosted by William Slight on the foreshore at Kirkcaldy, he said a violent struggle ensued, with William apparently crashing down on top of Stephen, and Stephen struggling like a madman to try and push William off him. as he couldn't breathe. At which point Stephen drew his sheath knife and continued to fight to free himself. Stephen said that he'd forgotten about the knife completely and never had the sensation of anything going in or out, but thought I had perhaps stabbed him once or twice, but it didn't look severe, and he could hear William breathing heavily. Stephen Thom then admitted that he took William's wallet in the hope of trying to identify him, denying any intent to rob him. It was reported in court that Stephen had actually stabbed William repeatedly. And that was all I could find from September 1981, or the rest of that year. Only one article about the murder trial, and no outcome. I almost gave up and wasn't going to tell you about this story at all, as who wants to hear a story with no outcome when there clearly should have been one? But I persevered and eventually struck gold when I came across the second article about this case on the 7th of May, 1982. From that article, I found out that at the end of the 5-day trial, the jury unanimously found Stephen Thom guilty of murdering father of two William Slight, and he was sentenced to life imprisonment. But that wasn't the end of the story, as the 1982 article was headed Murder Conviction Quashed. Apparently, Stephen Thom had been granted an appeal of his conviction, which was heard by 3 appeal judges at the Court of Criminal Appeal in Edinburgh. After hearing Stephen's appeal, the 3 appeal judges decided that Stephen Thom's special defence of having acted in self-defence should have been accepted by the original trial judge, and that because it hadn't been accepted, the jury had been misdirected. Ultimately, Stephen Thom's murder conviction was overturned, and instead his conviction was reduced to culpable homicide, and he was sentenced to 9 years in prison. So I'm kind of glad there wasn't an outcome of the trial, as if there had been, I'd never have gone looking and would have missed that Stephen Thom's conviction had been quashed. And finally, a story that could have ended so differently, as anyone who climbs or has climbed any of the mountains in Scotland knows. There are beautiful views when you get up there, but they can be so dangerous, with the weather changing so quickly. Thankfully, that was not the case for the following holiday goers. Stephen Griffiths and Christine Dickey, who were on holiday from Portland in Oregon, unintentionally sparked a major search operation in the Sky Coolin after failing to cancel a mountain climbing route form they had left at a designated hotel. The form had stated where the couple had intended to go and that they planned to return by 5 p.m. However, due to mist, the couple had abandoned their hike after 3 hours and returned to their car, forgetting to notify the hotel. Their oversight led to a full-scale search of the range and gullies well into the evening by the Sky Mountain Rescue Team, police inquiries with the US Embassy in London and Home Office centres, and radio appeals for information. The couple were eventually located when an English holidaymaker, who had met them on the far side of the mountains, recognised their car when he heard the appeals on the radio and reported their car's licence number to the police. Stephen and Christine were met by police officers as they disembarked the Hebrides ferry at Tarbert in Harris, surprised by the scale of the response. Stephen expressed deep regret for the confusion, saying that they were extremely sorry for the trouble caused. And that brings us to the end of another Scotland Then episode. I hope you enjoyed it. Next week, I hope to release a normal Scottish Murders episode covering the case of Pat McAdam. So until then, I've been your host, Dawn.
Scottish Murders is a production of Clurin Ton.